It often comes in mysteriously unexpected ways. It blossoms sometimes from out of the very grave wherein we imagined that our happiness was buried. Okay, that was the first quote. All these past years, I celebrated this holiday with the vanities of the world. From this year henceforward, I will do it with the divinity of God. How much more happy I am for this present life of mine than for all those things remembered. The next quote, man is meant for happiness, and this happiness is in him, in the satisfaction of the daily needs of existence. And unhappiness is the fatal result, not of our need, but of our abundance. So I guess I maybe should have offered more explanation to these quotes. I think here, this last quote, I can add that sort of the fact that we are maybe getting rid of or kind of halting the unnecessary abundance of our lives, the overproduction, I don't know, kind of extraneous, superfluous things that have been making us unhappy. So actually this simplicity where we are only kind of occupied with the needs of our existence, this actually creates happiness. And again, in kind of a much, in a vast way, that kind of in a very significant way. Okay, the next quote, only when the common practical man becomes a lover does the hard externality give way, and a gleam of insight into the objective world, the vast world of inner life beyond us, so different from that of outer seeming, illuminate our mind. So I think this is really beautiful. He talks about this objective world as a vast world of inner life beyond us, so different from outer seeming. And this is something that illuminates our mind. I mean, again, I think every one of these quotes could really be discussed at length. Okay, the next one. This higher vision of an inner significance often comes over a person suddenly, and when it does so, it makes an epoch in his history. There is a depth in those moments that constrains us to ascribe more reality to them than to all other experiences. So again, he talks about a higher vision that when we kind of tap into it, it becomes a very huge, a very powerful experience. And then we realize this is much more real than anything we've experienced before. So, okay, so that was kind of the conclusion about William James. And now I'm going to conclude, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is from the field of educational philosophy. So I will now offer some thoughts. Well, what does all of this mean for education and philosophy of education? So again, just a brief review. We talked about, James' philosophy about this limitless aesthetic potential that's concealed in any natural object, whether it's like a river, a flower, an animal, right? All these beautiful things found in nature. And that this beauty is of the same quality that's concealed in the neighbor, the fellow human being. So, and revealing this potential hinges only on the observer's capacity to see it instead of remaining blind to it. So I'm arguing that this bears important normative implications for educators and curriculum developers if education is to reflect axiological values that incorporate aesthetics and ethics in a continuous framework. So again, the conclusion is that the study of all natural and social sciences should be centered on this significant axiological element, and importantly, because it is a pathway into the objective world. So to try to explain that maybe in simpler words, curricula or programs for children or adults in, for example, natural sciences, physics, biology, zoology, astronomy, like all the natural fields, as well as the humanities, languages, literature, sociology, so kind of the aesthetic and the ethical, right, fields. All of this should be designed, these curricula should be designed in ways that highlight this unified axiological dimension. But it's important that the curriculum developers are aware that the sort of aim of this is epistemological access, meaning knowledge of this limitless eternal world that we reveal, according to James, when we overcome our blindness. So education can therefore be a tool for continued sharpening of the aesthetic or axiological vision. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you. Let me stop share. Okay, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer.
Yes, Karen, I have probably one short question. First of all, thank you very much. It was really a very nice and deep presentation from my point of view. The question that I have, how unique is James in his vision of axiological blindness? It's really nice to see how his vision is narrow or just very broad.
So regarding how unique, I think I mentioned this in the opening of my presentation. I'm finding, the more I'm kind of studying various philosophers, that many of them are talking about really very similar things, but each from kind of a different perspective. So I think these similar concepts, although James has a unique way and a unique approach that's uniquely his, it's really easy to draw, connections to other philosophers, either even going back to antiquity, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, and through, all the. I mentioned this, that I think it's very interesting to really study them, particularly now when kind of these concepts are really opening up, I think, more than before, at least to myself as a researcher, that I think many of them were talking, like, for example, I could give an example of the really famous text by Plato. It's Plato wrote it, but it's Socrates, right? He's giving an account of Socrates' experience in Phaedo. This is one of the most famous texts in philosophy, where Socrates was sentenced to death for his philosophy. Before his death, he talks about a really similar thing that James talks about here. I wish I had the quote in front of me, but he talks about this objective world that we can see. He says it's like a fish that spent its life in the river, and it peeks out and it sees a much broader world. And so there are many examples. So I'm not sure James is unique in this, but yeah, that's what I can say.
I have a question too. Basically, it is, one of the things that I'm aware of is that the axiology is actually the study of the values that society implements. So it's like a value theory. What's interesting, and he does have a very acute sense and very similar basically to Kabbalistic of what we study. That which we value is where our mind is. And I agree that we have to develop the curriculum that basically this world can be studied as a means instead of an end. How we do this, I'm not sure that we have, I don't know if he does or not. I never really looked at him deeply, but that's what the question is. Do we have a way based on his steps in determining what a society should put value on or less value on, that can help us to determine how to establish the curriculum in a way that can become integral to teach that our value should be in this other world thing, and we should just use this world as a means to get to an end.
Thank you, Gara. Okay, so I will answer first of all regarding axiology. There are actually sort of a couple of ways to understand it, and one is what you said, the values, right, worths, and the other is kind of more like what I talked about, the aesthetics and ethics, which are also, they also talk about value. They talk about the values in ethics and aesthetics, but so there are kind of two ways to understand axiology, one about values in general and one specifically about values in ethics and aesthetics. And my concept of axiology, I have it in my references in my paper, if it's going to be available later. It was from a work that's also really fascinating work called Voices of Imagination, The Artist as Prophet in the Process of Social Change, from the International Journal of Leadership and Education, where it kind of opens up axiology as like in the way that I presented in this work. So that's regarding that. And regarding your question, what would James consider really worthwhile in education? I think we could really get hints of that from his essay, where he does talk about value. He talks about the limitless significance. Again, I don't have his essay in front of me now, but he says, I think several times, that this kind of objective world, when we feel it, like even in the quotes I presented just now, we find that it's much more valuable than, what we experienced previously. So I think he does offer a lot of information, what is valuable to him. And also I know that the following essay from the one I presented, it's actually called What Makes a Life Worthwhile, or something like that, from this volume of talks. So I think to maybe find out about your question, it would be good to read that essay as well and see, well, because it's specifically devoted to that question.
Thank you so much, Karen. In essence of time, I think we'll move ahead and we'll try to address all the questions as we go along.
Далее. Я хотел бы тоже спросить. Я солидарен с Ефраимом, мне очень понравился доклад. И мне близки идеи, которые там звучали. У меня все-таки остается вопрос. Понятно, что единицы каким они, так сказать, открыли для себя этот внешний мир полной красоты. Мне очень хотелось бы передать это всем остальным. Но как это можно сделать? Существовала известная концепция, что красота мира. Попытки были сделаны воспитывать в этом духе людей. Как мы знаем, как мы видим сегодня, что это потерпело абсолютный крах. И мы движемся только, в общем, в обратную сторону. Вот как практически вы видите сегодня, как можно вот людей пробудить к этому, чтобы увидеть не отдельных, так сказать, рожденных как бы в этом ключе и воспринимающих эти идеи, а вот те, которые простые смертные, как можно это все реализовать?
How we can realize it or to make it happen?
Yes, thank you. I'll just repeat the question. So really, how do we actually make this aesthetic experience, available to many people, right, and not just individuals? So I think this is a very important question, and it's, I think, particularly why my focus is on education, and my kind of summary was about education. And rather than just talking about all this wonderful philosophy and these philosophical ideas, it's really important at the end of the day to think about, well, what does this mean for education, and to develop specific, methods for educators, and then to engage with educators to develop these programs and to implement them, for children and adults, that it's really through education, but, the engagement between education and philosophy, for example, to transfer these wonderful, beautiful ideas from, the philosophers who live in that world to, the masses, and again, through education. So I think really education is the only way, but maybe there are kind of broad ways to think about education. I mean, education is everything. It's what, the advertisements we see on the television, we're surrounded, like all of the information that we process educates us. So, to work with educators, but also to work with people who form public opinion. What are the commercials they're showing? Is it to advertise the pursuit of practical ends, which don't make us happy? Or is it, to advertise maybe, I don't know, thinking more about others, or, all these wonderful things that James talks about. So the point is not to leave it in the realm of theory and philosophy, but really to engage with, educators and with people who influence, the masses.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Our next presenter is Ms. Carrie Berkowitz from the United States. She's an educator of over 15 years and founder of Center for Relational Practices. She's one of the top experts in restorative practices. Her presentation is entitled Building Positive Relationships in Schools. Thank you so much. Carrie?
Thanks, Alina. Greetings, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here with all of you today. I am joining you all from the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's just truly a pleasure to be part of such an important conference on this topic that truly touches all of us, even without us potentially being aware of it. I think it makes a lot of sense that this presentation is coming after Karen's, because it is really about bringing into the dialogue the context of our schools education in a very practical way, the importance of ensuring that we have positive relationships, that we bring that human experience into our schools to influence the learning and the development that happens for our youth, as well as for families. Schools are a really important component of our society, for individuals, for the students, for educators, and for families. So that's what we're going to do, because really when we look closely and break it all down, the experience of school is truly nothing more than just a tightly woven, interconnected web of relationships. How we're able to convey and reach our youth, how we're able to provide valuable educational learning experiences for them, largely depends on the relationships that they have with those in their learning community, with their teachers, with their fellow peers. And so what we're talking about here is relationships among all members of the community, as I just spoke to. And it's really this web of relationships that are the cogwheels that drive the inner workings of what we call school. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to share with all of you some very practical ways, things that are currently happening in many schools around the world, definitely here in the United States, but also in many other countries. So we can see how to bring to life the true human experience in our schools. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I also have some slides to share, and I'm also hoping that I'll be able to share a couple examples, so you'll be able to hear students and teachers talking about their experience as well, because I think that's sometimes the best way to learn about these practices. And so it's always good to start with science, of course, and research. And so what I have here up on the screen, I know there's a lot of content here for you. But what we have here is a series of, excuse me, various research studies. And everything you see in yellow is the finding of the study, and everything in gray is the name of the study and the authors, the researchers of that particular study. And one thing I want to mention is that while it may look like just a list of completely different research studies, they all have a common thread. All of these great outcomes, or the findings that's listed here in yellow, all stem from the same thing. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to take a moment just to read through here some of these findings. I can also call out some of them and think about what do you think it is that causes all of these findings that we see here. So we see that there's one thing that contributes to our influence or influences our motivation to learn. And we see that this causes students to be less likely to reject one another. It's a positive influence on social skill development. We see less aggression and violence. It's a protective factor for learning and positive life development. We see increased behavioral and emotional engagement. It leads to an increase of a feeling of school community. And we also see that this leads to higher student achievement and fewer discipline problems, fewer behavior challenges. So I'll give you a moment to think about what is this one thing that leads to all these outcomes. And in a moment, I'll move on to the next slide, which will show us. All right. And feel free for those of you that are in the Zoom. I know many of you are watching via YouTube or Facebook, but if you are with us here in the Zoom and you want to write your thoughts in the chat, please go ahead and freely use our chat feature here to share any thoughts to any questions that I might present throughout the presentation. All right. So the answer that leads to all these amazing findings are, of course, positive student-student and teacher-student relationships. It is, I don't think this is really necessarily new information for us. I think very few people would say that they weren't aware of the importance of relationships in our schools. But what's important, and there's truly no shortage of research that points to the importance of relationships in our schools. So then the question becomes, if that outcomes are so important, I mean, if we take time to build positive student relationships between teachers and between the students themselves, and it directly influences their academic learning, it directly influences their, having a positive life development. It reduces some of the behavior challenges that we have in our schools. So the question becomes, why isn't this more of a priority for us in our schools? So much of our school experience is focused just on the academic content and that, of course, and instruction. And of course, that's very important. But in order to be successful with our academic learning, we have to have positive relationships to begin with. So that's an important question that many schools are now starting to reflect on. How do we create more opportunities for us to truly establish these positive relationships with each other? And what we're talking about here, when it all comes down to it, we're really talking about building the best environment in our schools as possible that's going to lead to the best outcomes for both individuals and community. And one of the easiest ways to gauge the current climate of the school is just by that feeling you get when you walk into the doors of a school building, right? We're talking about physical learning, physical experience of being in school right now. I know, of course, there's been a lot of changes with the need to shift to distance learning and virtual platforms for learning. So that in of itself is also something that we definitely need to look at. But in terms of the physical experience of being in school, let's just take a moment to connect with this young boy here standing facing the doors of his school experience. Wherever you are around the world, wherever you're tuning into this conference from, if you could just think about what might be going through this, this young student's mind as he's entering into the school. What is he anticipating? What's that feeling he's going to get when he enters into the school? So I just want to give you a moment just to connect to that, because the experience of all of our youth as they come into the school might be very different. And what actually happens in that building, the efforts that are being made in the school building itself to create the best environment possible for their learning is hugely going to influence the students' experience as they enter through those doors. So what exactly is restorative practices? Restorative practices is an umbrella term that captures a system of principles and processes. So I have a kind of explicit definition here for you. It's very much simplified, but ultimately it's a system of principles and processes that emphasize the importance of trusting relationships as central to building community and repairing relationships when harm occurs. And so ultimately there's three main parts to this. We do have a set of, we introduce a set of relational principles and values. In our previous presentation from Karen, we started talking about the values. What are those values? How do we create an environment that's truly grounded in a set of shared values and really recognizing the importance of relationship and applying that as a lens in which we do our work through. So everything that we do moving forward comes through this lens of paying attention to the quality of our relationships. And so on the one side, we have everything that we do to build and sustain the relationships in the community. It really does take some effort and some work to foster strong relationships and to truly create a strong sense of community. And so there's a lot of practices that we do to achieve this. And so I'll introduce some of what those practices are for you today. And then also on the other side is after we spend such a significant amount of time building the relationships and really caring for that and fostering that, we also need to introduce an effective way of responding to some of the conflicts that might come up or some of the behavior challenges that might happen in the community that cause potentially some harm to others in the community. And so we need to also introduce, again, through this relational lens, applying these relational principles, we need to introduce a process to be able to address some of those conflicts that are coming up in a way that restores that relationship and ultimately brings that community back together. So I'm going to share with you one of the core concepts, one of the principles. We would also say this is one of the underlying premise of what restorative practices is all about in our schools, is this recognition that if people are going to make positive changes in their lives, when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. This is a really important principle that we apply in multiple different ways. But this concept of doing things with others, we're really looking at reshifting the dynamic of power difference in our schools, where up until now, I know teachers are often viewed as, you know, this as the authoritarian, that they have the final say in the class, they make all the decisions. And so ultimately we're needing to come together as a community, work together. And so how do the teachers apply this principle of doing things with? By having very high expectations. We need to have very high expectations for what we expect in our community, for what we want to build in our community, in our learning environment. But we also have to have very high levels of support. We have to be caring, we have to show concern. And so when we bring these two things together of high expectation and high concern and support and care, ultimately then we are able to work with one another. So it's kind of endless possibilities of how we can apply this concept or this principle of doing things with others. So what are some of these practices that we introduce to help us build these relationships? I've listed out here a few of the core practices, and I'll just briefly touch upon them, and I'll show a couple examples of one of these practices next. Actually, we'll see an example of it. But ultimately, when we're talking about relationships, it's really important that we are also recognizing that in order to be in good relationship with others, in order to be able to form strong bonds and connection with others, there are some skills that are required. We need to pay attention to what are those skills that we need in order to be able to truly sustain relationships over time. And so one of those skills, which has already actually been mentioned in earlier presentations, is the importance of listening. You know, listening truly is a practice of connection, and it's a skill. Just because we have ears and can hear, it doesn't mean that we're truly hearing. It doesn't mean that we're truly listening to what someone is sharing. And so that's something that we really want to pay attention to and introduce opportunities to really learn about listening and truly practice it. So when we have interactions with one another, everybody leaves that interaction truly feeling heard, feeling that they were able to connect with what the other person was trying to convey, and that the other person feels heard. We also would see lots of connection activities happening in our schools. We would see any opportunity, even if it's only 2 minutes before class, before the teacher starts teaching the curriculum, the learning content for that day, we would really prioritize connection. We would prioritize these opportunities for relationship building. And so a teacher might do something like, for the first 5 minutes of class, do some kind of game or provide some opportunity for students to form a small group and just talk with each other, learn about each other, build those relationships. And that is an incredible investment in the community, because that is going to significantly influence how well the students are going to be able to work together in that class if they form those strong relationships with one another. So there's lots of different examples of connection activities, and we would expect to see many of them happening in our schools. We also would spend some time coming together as a community to decide or to have dialogue about how do we want to be with each other here in our community. Ultimately, we create the type of environment that we want to have in our schools. Of course, the teachers are going to model, right, and hold that space, but we also have to bring the students into it. So this again brings up that conversation that we're just starting to have around values. We want to give everyone an opportunity to share what is it that is important to them that they need in the community in order to really be their best selves. And so we would provide opportunities for everybody to share values and to come together as a collective community to determine, okay, this is how we're going to be. And then we hold each other accountable to that. We also need to pay attention to how we are making decisions. Decision making is a really big component of us forming together as a community. There's lots and lots I can say here about this, but I'll just the one thing I'll just mention is the importance for everybody who's a part of that community, whether it's a classroom community or an entire school community, that everybody feels that they are valuable, that they're valued, that they have a meaningful opportunity to participate, especially in the decisions that impact them, to have a voice in that process. And so there's multiple different strategies for how we can be inclusive in our decision making. And so this is something that we would want for schools to pay attention to. Affective language is also something that we would introduce. Again, this is something that requires a full presentation in of itself, but affective language ultimately is a very powerful way of communicating with others, where we're being very concise in sharing, helping others to learn about how their actions are impacting others. So again, we're always bringing it back to the environment, to how what we are doing is impacting those around us. And so we use affective language to both reinforce the behaviors that we see and the actions that we see others taking that really benefit our society, benefit our community. And we would also use this affective language strategy or approach to highlight maybe what someone is doing that is potentially not benefiting the community. And then finally, we have our circles. Circle is definitely one of the core practices. We can also talk about it in terms of a roundtable type workshop, but circles are absolutely a practice that leads to incredible connection between everybody involved. Ultimately, what we're doing when we come together in circle is we are very intentionally lifting the barriers between people. We try to come together without there being any furniture between us. We introduce a set structure. We introduce very clear guidelines. Dr. Coletti earlier spoke about the rules of the workshop, and they're very similar that we bring into our schools. ultimately, some of the guidelines that we introduce are speaking from your heart, listening from your heart. We would also introduce what we call a talking piece, and that ensures that everybody is heard and has an equal opportunity to speak. So I think one of the best ways to convey to you the impact and power of circles is to show you an example of it. So I have a video that we'll watch. It's just about 2.5 minutes long. But what we'll see here is some high school students that have been in circle. So you'll hear a little bit of seeing them in a circle and hearing them talk about circle, and then I can further elaborate on it. So I will share this video with us.
Circle is a chance to express yourself without being judged.
It feels good to be in circle because it just allows me to get a lot of stuff off my chest.
Circle is a group who get together and they talk about what they go through, the things they've been through, the stuff that happens to them, and they just share things that they haven't shared with others.
A community circle is just a group of people getting together and choosing a topic and sharing your opinions on that topic.
Circles are a restorative practice used in schools for community building as a way to promote positive relationships.
What is one thing you wanted as a kid that you never got?
Someone to motivate me.
Someone to understand me.
A father figure in the house.
A full family with a mom and a dad in the household.
What is the most exciting thing that you can imagine happening to you?
Knowing I'm going to be successful.
Circles have impacted our schools in a very positive way. We've seen students interact much better with one another. We've seen teachers interact with students in a much more positive way. Students have felt heard. They can talk without being judged. They can talk without being challenged. When they have the talking piece in their hand, they can say whatever is on their minds. It also has helped in reducing suspensions because students have been able to work out difficulties and situations, occurrences that have happened where there have been arguments, and it's allowed them to talk to one another and hear each other's points of view.
I do believe that the circle is a good way to help solve conflict, because if I had a problem with somebody in the group, saying we could just sit down and talk about it in a controlled environment where it would be easier for us to express our feelings instead of having us to turn to violence.
Everyone should come to circles. All schools should have circles because it's just the greatest thing I've seen. It's a good program, and coming here just gets things off your chest.
All right, so I hope that provided just a little snapshot of the power of circles in schools. There's so many different types of circles. I do multiple day trainings on circles themselves and training educators around how to bring circle into their classrooms. So one thing I'll mention is that a few different types of circles that we can do is ultimately the structure is the same. We have a very similar flow of steps that we follow when we come together in circle, but the type of circle might be very different depending on the need. And so we have proactive circles. And so this is a class of circles that we do ultimately with the intention of building community and building relationships. And so it might be, for example, that we have a new student that has joined our classroom community. And so we're going to have a welcoming circle for that student where everybody introduces themselves, and maybe a prompt that they could respond to could be something like, what is one valuable piece of information that you think that you can share with our new friend here that can help them have the best experience in our school as possible? Or even just to get to know each other a little bit better. We can have celebration circles. We can also do types of circles for goal setting. It's the beginning of the week and we want to set some goals and support each other with the goals that we're setting as far as what we want to accomplish. So it's kind of endless possibilities of what we could do in those types of circles. We also use circles, and I think we heard some of the students mention this in the video, to address some of the problems that might be coming up. Maybe there's a a classroom issue. There's something that's happening in the classroom that's really impacting the learning on a regular basis, and it's becoming a concern. So for example, maybe students are coming late to class every day, and it's really interfering with them being able to get going with their class learning. Or maybe there's bullying happening in the classroom, or excessive disrespectful language, right? There's so many different things that might be happening. And so coming together in circle, again, this is the teacher doing things with the students, instead of the teacher just telling the students there's a problem here and this is what we're going to do about it, is to come together in circle to really listen to each other, to listen to the students' experience of what is happening, and give them an opportunity to share some ideas and solutions to whatever the problem might be. And then of course, we also can do academic circles. We certainly can bring our academic curriculum and content into a circle experience as well. It completely restructures the learning experience from being in desks and rows to coming together in a circle structure where all students can see each other. All students are equally participating, responding, dialoguing about some of the academic content and material that they're learning about. So there's just so much that happens when we come together in circle. All right, so that completes the part of our presentation where I'm introducing some of the practices around building the relationships and the community. And so now I'm going to shift and speak a little bit about how do we restore these relationships? So after we've spent time, right, we've been coming together, we're learning about each other, we're building our community, and then maybe something happens between a couple students in the class that really impacts their relationship, and not only their relationship, but also affects everybody else in their classroom too. And so we also need to be able to respond to those situations, again, through this lens of relationship. All right, so question for you, just to consider here, and if you'd like to put a thought in the chat, you're welcome to. Why is it important for us to pay attention to the way that we respond to challenging behaviors? So I'll just give you a moment to think about that, and to think about what is the current way that we are handling challenging behaviors in our schools. What might that be, and why is it important that it's something that we really pay attention to here? Give you a moment to think about that. All right, so I'll share with you that at least here in the United States, and I believe outside of the United States as well, there's policies that are called zero tolerance. So this is a policy ultimately that was introduced in the 80s here in the United States, but it's a policy that was put into place. It was a federal policy that was put into place that ultimately says, if you do this, if a student does X, then Y has to happen. So ultimately it was, if a student fights at school, then they have to be penalized for that behavior. And the penalty is, it could be something, and it's usually a punitive type consequence. So the penalty for fighting in school could be that you have to be suspended, or it could even be a referral to the law enforcement. And on some of the less severe type behaviors as well, so if a student uses disrespectful language in the classroom, then they automatically, it's like, if you do this, then you have to leave the classroom. And usually zero tolerance impacts on our students. And research has clearly now identified that if a student is suspended just once in 9th grade, so the first year in high school, if they're suspended only once in high school, it increases their risk of dropping out by times 3. They're 3 times more likely to drop out of school. So we're seeing a very strong relationship between school suspension and dropping out of school. We're also seeing increased contact with juvenile justice system. So again, there's very strong connections here. If they're not in school, they're going to be more likely to get involved with the juvenile justice system. And ultimately, when we bring these two studies together, it becomes very clear what is this phenomenon that is happening, which is called the school to prison pipeline. So this is exactly what the school to prison pipeline is. And then we have to ask this question, what does this response do for the relationship between these two? Say in this situation, these two young men here got into a fight at school. By them just having to go home for anywhere between 3 to 10 days, what does this actually do to address the real issue that happened between them? As well as the others who witnessed the incident. Usually the students would just be suspended, they'd come back, maybe the principal or someone at the school would talk to them, they go back to class, and that's it. All right, so this is our standard traditional way of responding to behaviors. Many schools are not satisfied with this, and the research clearly is pointing out that it's actually causing harm to our students, this approach. So the question becomes, well, what else can we do? And so many schools hasn't really known. They're like, well, we don't know what else to do. And so fortunately, this is where what's called restorative justice comes in. There's a lot to say about restorative justice. It very much is grounded in indigenous roots. Dr. Kelechi also spoke about that. When there's trouble, the elders come together. It's a very inclusive process of dialogue, and we talk about solutions. How are we going to address this situation? And so the restorative justice truly has its roots in indigenous practice. It's also used as an additional approach in our criminal justice system, and was viewed as being so successful that it was brought into our schools as well. So what happens in a restorative justice model? Instead of the two students being suspended, of course, safety is always primary concern. So if the students are escalated and it's not safe for them to be at school because we're concerned another fight will happen or that might cause more harm, of course, we can't have them in the school. But if safety isn't a concern, and they're de-escalated and they could still be in school, we can address the situation in a different way without them having to leave and miss their educational experience. So what we would do is we would bring them together into a dialogue process. And in a moment, I'll share what happens in this dialogue process. But before we do, I just want to quickly talk about the difference here between the criminal justice, which is our traditional model of discipline in our schools, compared to a restorative justice model. Ultimately, we're asking three very different questions. So in our criminal justice model, we would focus on, okay, what are the laws or the rules that have been broken? Who did it? And what do they deserve, right? What do they deserve for breaking this rule? Hence the punitive punishment, right? The consequence. In a restorative justice model, instead of asking what are the laws that have been broken, we still very much recognize that we need to have rules. Of course, we need to have very clear expectations. Even better that the community itself has come up with these expectations, right? Shared values. But ultimately, we're looking at if there's some kind of rule has been broken, we would say, well, who has been hurt as a result of this incident? How are the people affected by what happened? And then we would look at what are their needs? What does everybody need in this situation? And then whose obligations are these to meet these needs? So it's a completely different, it's a huge shift in how we actually engage in our behavior response. Again, the priority here being relationships. And so there's a conflict between people. We want to bring them back together in dialogue to understand what really happened, how was everybody affected by it, and what do we need to do to make things right moving forward. So this slide introduces the process of when we do come together in a restorative dialogue type process. There's a few different stages to it. So ultimately we're starting with the first stage of telling the story. So we're really, again, listening is so important. We're wanting to truly hear and understand like what was happening in that moment for everybody. What were you thinking at the time? What led up to it? And then we also want to know, well, what do you think about what happened now? So we're giving the individuals themselves to share about their learning experience. So at the time, maybe a student can say, well, at the time I was really, really angry. I was heated. I wasn't really thinking and I did this. But now after thinking about it, now I realize, that maybe I overreacted or I did something, I acted out of anger instead of taking a walk, so they're really sharing their own learning experience. We're also coming together. So after telling the story, then we're exploring the impact that whatever it was happened had on, again, the environment, always also being at the center of our focus. How did what happened affect the environment? How did it affect individuals and our relationships? So then we're looking at, okay, what are our needs as a result? And then we open it up in a consensus type dialogue process to be like, okay, where do we go from here? What needs to happen at this point to make things right and to bring our community back together? And so usually at this point, we're making some additional agreements. So these are logical consequences. This isn't a punitive consequence. It's a logical consequence where the consequence in of itself is that we're participating in this process. And then also there's additional consequences of things that need to be followed up on to ensure that things are being made right and that needs are being met as best as possible. And then the final step here is that we want to, of course, follow up. So whatever agreements are made, we're following up to make sure that it actually happens and that whoever is actually getting support that they need in order to accomplish and be successful with those outcomes. All right, and how do we do this, right? So this is the process. We're so fortunate in that we actually have these amazing questions that guide us through this process. So literally, I countless number of times I've used these questions with students that have been in conflicts with each other. And it's truly remarkable how even if we just stick to these questions, it guides the individuals through this entire process that I've just spoken about. So the questions being, what happened and what were you thinking at the time of the incident? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what happened and how? This fourth question is so powerful. What about this has been the hardest for you? This is a huge empathy building question. I've had students say, well, yes, we got into this fight, and even though I did physically get hurt, the hardest thing for me was that all of my peers, all the other students in the class essentially witnessed me getting, beaten up. And he said that was so embarrassing for him. And so by him saying that, the other student that was in this dialogue immediately stepped in and said, I know exactly how that feels. That's happened to me before too. And so he was able to really connect to that feeling of that harm that he caused to that other student. And then finally, very importantly, what do you think needs to be done to make things as right as possible? So these are very powerful questions, and we can use them in multiple different ways. So coming back here to our foundational slide here, on the right-hand side here, we have the restoring relationships in the community. Essentially, it's the same process that I've just introduced, but we can use it we can apply this process in so many different ways. So it could be just a restorative dialogue type process. You're in the classroom, two students are starting to get into a little heated argument about something. You can step in, the teacher can step in and run through these questions with the two students on the spot very quickly. That would be like an impromptu type dialogue. Or we use the same process in our circles, in a repairing harm type circle when there's more people that are involved. And then for some of those incidents that are a much higher level of severity, for example, a physical fight at school. Recently, I facilitated a restorative, this is what we would call a formal conference. Again, it's the same process, but it usually at these higher levels of incidents, like I was just at a local school here in Oakland, California, there was a group of female 8th grade students who got caught vaping in the bathroom. And this was a very big deal for the school. They requested, and so I came in and facilitated this formal conference where we had all of those students there. We had their school advisors, and they also had a parent there with them. And so it was a lot of people. It took quite a bit more time, and the level of seriousness and formality of it was much higher due to the level of infraction of the incident. And so as we move through, it's the same process, but just the formality of our response changes depending on what it is that happened. And then another way to use this approach is as for re-entry. So if a student does have to leave the school for whatever reason, then we want to reintroduce them back into the school. Same as if a teacher, sends a student out of the class due to some behavior or concern or something happened. We always want to allow for that student to come back into the class in a way that will set them and the rest of the class up for success, reconnecting to that community. And so we can also use this for dialogue between the student and the teacher. And that's actually what I will close out my presentation with, is one more example of a teacher and a student going through this process together. There's so many times that the teacher and the students don't get a chance to really come back to repair their relationships when a student is maybe acting out in the class or being disrespectful to the teacher. I think student behavior is the number one reason that educators actually leave the profession, because it's so challenging sometimes for classroom management around behavior. It really is a big challenge. And so we need to provide opportunities for the teacher and the student to come together, to listen to each other, to understand each other, and to build stronger relationships with one another. So I'm going to share this. This is a podcast. And so we won't be able to see anything, but we will hear it's an interview. And so I'll go ahead and play it. It's about three minutes long, and this will conclude the presentation. And then if we have time, I'm happy to answer any questions. And yeah, so you'll see here, this was an incident happened in the classroom, and the teacher and the student participated in this restorative response. This took place in Texas. And so without further ado, I will play this for us.
To discipline at a public high school in Spring Branch. Students and teachers sit in a circle and talk about the problem. Teacher Eudoro Gatewood and her student Jermaine Williams talk about one circle they both joined.
Can you describe to me how you felt?
During the time of the incident or the time of the circle?
Of the incident.
The incident, heated. Mostly because of the fact that I felt like I have decent relationships with all of my students, to where, to lash out or to curse out, I didn't really see where that was coming from. So yeah, it was really at the point where I was saying, okay, this is a write-up, I'm done, this is it. Just that whole disruption, seriously made a huge dent in that class period. Nothing productive was even going on.
And there was an odd feeling of being in the class knowing that incident had happened.
Yes. Until the option of having the circle came up, and I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I can try this out. I was really concerned as far as, okay, is this going to be one of those slap of the hand moments that students will get, and they say, oh, I just need to do a healing circle, I'm fine, that's it.
The circle, I think it's an opportunity for individuals to see where someone else is coming from, or speak the truth and understand this is where I messed up at, or this is where this person is coming from. Being in the circle with you and the other individuals helped all of us as a whole.
I actually felt like you heard me. I felt like you were listening to what I was saying, even though, yes, I'm there as a teacher, student did me wrong, oh no. But no, I really felt like, at that moment, I felt like we were on the same page and the same playing field.
I think our relationship has gotten better after the circle.
I even told you, even in the circle, the class follows you to a T. If you say jump, silently they're all going to whisper, how high? So that's what the class does. Honestly, for me, I was like, man, if I can get you on my side, things will be cool. I feel like many teachers feel this way. We may not say it, but I want to be the first one to probably say it. I feel like if I look at you in class, I'm like, seriously, stop. And you kind of do the nod thing. You're just like, all right, I understand. Whether you realize it or not, everyone else in the class follows that without me even have to say their name.
Ms. Gatewood, I'm, honored or happy that you feel that way about me. I didn't know you felt that way about me in your class. It makes me feel like I can come to this class out of all 8 classes I'm in and stand out. Show the class that it's not too late to do work, to make somebody else laugh, to be there for somebody else, or, I have a comedian type. I like to make people laugh mostly all the time. So for that incident to happen and ruin things during sixth period, it was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to go to your class because that happened. And then when we had the circle, it was like, I'm ready for sixth period. I'm ready to go back, laugh again, play around, get work done.
That was 11th grader Jermaine Williams and his teacher.
All right. So I hope that gave you a little sense as to what this process is and the benefits that it has for us in our schools. And yeah, that concludes the presentation. I don't know if we have any time. I'm sorry, I lost track of our time a little bit here. Alina, is there any time for questions, or should we continue on?
One question that was posted in Facebook by Thomas. Not sure the pronunciation. I'll put it in the chat as well so everybody can read it. The question is, these ideas sound very good for students who come from somewhat stable families and neighborhoods. What of the students who come from crime-ridden and violent neighborhoods? Many of the families in these neighborhoods are broken also. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say all the more reason to bring these practices into the schools. When students are coming, restorative practices, or these set of practices and circles specifically, is known as a trauma sensitive, trauma informed practice. So when youth are experiencing a lot of trauma in their communities, in terms of community violence or violence in the home, it's so important for them to come into an environment in our school that is supportive, that is structured, that's caring, that's safe. And so all the more reason for teachers to be using these practices and really working on building those relationships between themselves and the students, so they can be more effective as teachers with the youth and better understand what the students are experiencing in their lives. That is also going to impact how they're showing up and what they're bringing into that school. So yeah, absolutely. I've seen very successful use of these practices in many of the schools that are the school that I started in, actually in San Francisco, is next to one of the largest housing project community in San Francisco, in Southeast San Francisco. And the need it was very clear that we had an incredible need to be very intentional about working on building the best environment in the school as possible. And that is actually what led me down this path, because I saw how important it is, and that became a really big component of my work, specifically around school climate and culture, and bringing these restorative practices to the school. So yeah, thank you for the question. That's really important.
Thank you so much.
All right, absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again. We do need to move on to our next presenter. This is our last presenter for today. We will resume again.
Is there no room for more questions, or I really wanted to ask?
We're a little bit past the time, but do you have a question, Karen?
Yes. Well, I really wanted to thank Carrie. It was such a beautiful presentation. I actually got a little emotional at the end from the interview. It was really beautiful. And I think it's great you followed me. I actually wanted to maybe tie in what you spoke about. So, when we talk about these kind of practices in schools, it kind of implies that we're creating like good relationships in the classroom and resolving problems. Do you see room? I mean, we are talking kind of in the Integral World Research Institute. Do you see kind of potential for maybe developing these practices, or like for educators to to bring in the additional understanding? There's that these processes create maybe a much broader, maybe epistemological kind of awareness, or that it has a much greater effect beyond what is just happening in that classroom, that there's some connection through that to this integral system of nature, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that takes it to a much deeper level. And I think that is actually the next component that needs to be integrated into it, just like expanding it beyond how interconnected we truly are. And I think that that this provides a very strong platform for us actually bringing in that the importance of that conversation and understanding of the integral aspect of our functioning as a school, as a society, as all of humanity, and what that means for us and what we're learning here and how we're using these practices can be applied, you know, beyond the walls of this classroom. So yes, absolutely. I would say that's very much the next step that needs to be further enhanced in these practices. Would take it to a much deeper and more profound level even. Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I don't think I mentioned, Carrie is also part of the IWRI Education Department. So we're very blessed to have her with us. Thank you. Okay, so our next presenter is Mr. Adomas Davalga from Lithuania. He is a former diplomat, lecturer in conflict resolution, war, and peace studies. The name of his presentation is Conditions for Integral and Inclusive Society. Thank you so much, Mr. Davalga.
Yes, hello everyone. Warm welcome from Vilnius. Actually, it's the first warm day this year. It's truly a first summer day, warm day in Lithuania. Previous it was really cold. I have a suspicion it's because of this conference. My presentation was very much influenced, although it was initially written and prepared several months ago before the coronavirus. So the corona changed significantly the presentation, but your presentations of previous speakers changed it even more, I would say. Some of the points I will mention very briefly, so my presentation maybe will be even shorter than most of yours. But a couple of ideas came and a couple of points I was able to develop even more, and I would gladly like to share the ideas. And maybe we'll have questions and time for short discussion. So yeah, talking about the main topic about integrality and inclusiveness. Yeah, we know these concepts. It's quite clear what they mean. Inclusiveness means involving, including more vulnerable groups in the state and in our societies. And what coronavirus did is what was almost a dream, or I couldn't even dream of such a factor that could enable this inclusiveness to happen or start happening. And what happened is that we felt, all of us felt really dependent on each other. Now when we hear on the news that some new virus was found in China or in Italy or somewhere, oh, you like start shaking, what's happening, you know, and you start feeling at once that it's tomorrow or in 2 weeks or so it will affect you. And this brought our societies, countries, to people to higher social sensitivity. Also, yeah, all of us started to feel, have this feeling global. We had many feelings before that, but that feeling global, I think most of my friends started to follow the news. Most of them, not from the diplomatic corps, but let's say people who usually don't follow the news, they started to do that. And also, by the way, this Ubuntu concept is really beautiful. couple of years ago, I met the ambassador of South African Republic, and our meeting, I was chargé d'affaires at that moment, and we planned to have a conversation for half an hour, ended with a talk of 3 hours only about this concept. So I will say shortly, it's Ubuntu total now. Like I think everybody now understands this concept, even in 2 or 3 sentences. So this is what's happening now. Yeah, so yeah, I see. So really, it's so easy to talk. I can imagine my presentation like several months ago. I would have to, it would be very theoretical, and it would be very hard to give impressive examples, but now we can find many of them. So this part is really clear, and I wouldn't stop on this. I would stop on this. We wouldn't elaborate a lot. Actually, what happened in my country, and I believe in many, is that this new normal, so-called, has a missing link, and it's being felt more and more. And that's when we think and talk about governments and the role of government. On the one hand, it's the responsibility of the governments increased, how state government should deal in this situation, how they should ensure this very fragile balance in the society among various groups, when millions of people become unemployed, and a lot of really sensitive issues arise. And in this extreme, let's say, situation where I know this how apparatus works. It's really hard even during the smaller crises usually. So this is a big crisis, and when all of your workers, let's say diplomats, and then state people are, let's say, mostly now working virtually, connected virtually, it's even harder. But yeah, what happened is that coming back to integral and inclusive situation, is that ordinary people, as if we can say so, so not statesmen, felt that they are responsible for public goods. They're responsible for this inclusiveness, to take care of vulnerable groups. And what happened, for example, the movement of volunteers became so huge. Also, factor was that huge unemployment, and many people who are not working, even famous people from culture, let's say actors and so on, people will know, and ordinary people, let's say not so publicly vivid, joined the voluntary movements. And so they became very active in public life and caring for other people. And this is why this is important, because they compensated this missing link. It's really extraordinary, and I'm sure that Dr. Leah Mandler, she will be speaking tomorrow at this conference. She will elaborate. The title of her presentation is "Disaster Diplomacy, COVID-19 and International Relations." So yeah, she will talk. I'm sure she will tell us more about what is this disaster about. But when you think that there are, let's say, many states will have less money on defense and other, let's say, state functions, more and more people or public will take the responsibility of caring for many functions that the state was caring about. And what levers do we have in this situation? So we have 3 levers. All of them were mentioned in previous presentations, so I won't say anything new, but some very interesting idea came and could be elaborated. So these levers are education, of course, that integral education, inclusive, more inclusive education, just explaining and for all of us to realize what is happening, how dependent on each other we became, how vulnerable we became also. We all became these vulnerable groups or one group as one family. And this family model is as real as never before, and it's really close how we feel for what is happening in other family in other country. And so education, then public opinion, which we were also talking about, and yeah, Karen was talking about it in more detail, and Carrie mentioned relationship-based principles and values, and what of course not in all countries, but the third factor, of course, very important one, is the media. And what we noticed in Lithuania, that in this difficult situation, state radio and television took the role of, let's say, educator, no, helper, assistant in this difficult situation. And it's really interesting to see how the programs change, because most of the schools couldn't ensure virtual or distant learning, virtual education forms of educating children. So state television took this role, and it was really interesting to watch how it is happening. They were inviting best teachers who won prizes, who have the biggest sympathy of children. All programs became very interactive, very, I would say, even inclusive, because according to the rules of the media, it's European norms, they have to let's say, involve many social groups. So it was really interesting to see everyone participating in this program. So really, media, we see how, of course, in many countries it's different, but we have already example. I'm sure there are many more. How media is applying this, as Carrie mentioned in her presentation, relationship-based principles and values, and it's really felt. And also, apart from the programs for students, for children, for school children, there are several hours a day they dedicate to. They're inviting experts, scientists, people who can advise, give useful, very useful, practical, applicable advices for the population. And really, the national broadcaster became so much popular, and they opened extra channels on Facebook and YouTube and so on. So really, it's changed many things. And talking about characteristics, again, I can mention 3 important characteristics that characterize how new inclusiveness and new approach, how we integrate, how we strengthen our societies, how we strengthen state or even relationship between the states on all levels, basically. What, for example, Kerry was speaking about the system in the school, so it can be applied for all other levels and relationship in the country. And so intensiveness of this process is every moment, that we see how it is changing. It's changing life because of the interactiveness we can have. Actually, now I'm sure all of us are having meetings in the on the internet, and they become more and more interactive. So it's changing, and it's being adapted every moment. The quantity, the second characteristic, is global. So we have no limitations. For example, our broadcaster, national broadcaster, is giving lessons to all the students in one country and on one language. So really this efficiency, so to say, is enormous, and you can have a good piece of music or film or lesson or anything for open for everyone in no time. And quality, this is the last characteristic, is with love. And this is developing the idea of about which all of you were saying, which like several months ago it was more theoretical, but I can say, give an example from the diplomatic perspective. Actually, we already started to apply this principle with love several years ago. It was an official position of our embassy of Lithuania in Central Asia. What does this mean? We found out that if you approach, let's say, if you do business, if you connect with other diplomats, you initiate some project, that doesn't make any sense, even starting or initiating the project, if you don't approach it with love, and you let's say start do any action by forgetting this principle. Why? Because in the let's say complex environment, we found out we made an experiment. Let's call it an experiment. It lasted more than 4 years, and we've built a network of connections of people who were willing so much to help us. Actually, we were not initiating any of the projects. People, let's say, were approaching us, so it's like everything upside down, let's say. We didn't have to call anyone, to ask for anything to do, or the deadline is approaching, let's do it faster. No need for that. Only we decided that we invest in this good relationship with statespeople, journalists, and so on. Maybe more time was spent, talking, knowing each other more, even talking about such topics as family, education, for example. Let's say Ubuntu topic, and such topics, and which bring people closer together. That was the main aim. It was easy for us because we were 5 at the embassy. Of course, if it's a big organization, it's harder to let's say to start such an experiment and to persuade your superiors to test this. But because we had an ambassador had an autonomy, so he could allow this. And in the end, we were completely open with this. We announced after 4 years of this experiment that it was really successful. And I was so much spoiled by this experiment that when I came back to Vilnius, to my minister, I couldn't work anymore. It was hard for colleagues to understand this concept and to accept it at once. So I had to leave the diplomatic service. It was one of the easiest decisions in my life, I can say, and to invest more time in education, to dedicate to spend more time with my family, who are behind this window. I'm in the balcony. And really, many things are changing, and I'm so glad to be with you here. And thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. That was a beautiful lecture, and I've been going through all the discussions, and I think they are quite beautiful. Like you did mention, our world, we've become, more inclusive, family-like, and but I also think that yes, we're looking at education, like he did mention, bringing in celebrities, the media, and all that, to make the family together, the Ubuntu, and all that. But I'm thinking now, because we're looking at situations that we have at hand, which, like we did mention, that maybe some years back you wouldn't think, or rather, like some months back, he said his lecture not changed because of practical example of what is happening now. But as scientists, educators, and all that, I think it's also important to look into our world and how we can also take advantage of what is happening to us now, because if you are quite conversant with what is happening with the COVID and all that, we know that yes, viruses, they don't exist in nature. They are being motivated and all that. But you see, if we follow the events, you just know that what is happening in our world now, it was planned. And if you look at certain events that are held like some years back, last year, in fact, I'll make reference to Event 201, the simulation, of Event 201 and all that, when the government, the United Nations and all that were involved, and the discussion was all on pandemic, what if such happened and how it would be handled in the world, and so you can actually know that whatever we're in, was well planned, and we now find ourselves in this, and we looking at basically most of the presentation is now how we can manage the situation. But the truth is, we look at the role that the media has played, beautiful role, but you still find out there are certain roles that which probably, if we have advantage of, we could turn out the play in a certain way, because many people, like Mr. Adomas just said, some of his friends now started listening to news and all that. We scientists, many times, we're not interested in what is happening in our world. We want to just, we're basically in the lab, want to discover things, and don't care what is happening in the society. But the truth now is that what happens in our world determines the kind of life we now live. And we are now, many of us are confined in our homes. We do online, which is beautiful. We, in recent time, that there was or rather a plan for we looking at the revolution of our world, the fourth industrial revolution, and all that, and the how quick it should come. Now you could understand that it's planned and simulated, that we have to move quickly into that. So we are now playing catch up with whatever that is happening, and I'm sure as scientists and those that research, it's also important for us to really look into what is happening in our world, and then try to create it was actually talking about conflict resolution and, basically solving problems in our world. We should look broader, in a way that we can be able to manage what is happening, because to be honest with you, the media hasn't played a very good part, because there are certain information that is withheld from the people, because we have to depend on others to give us information, because it's their profession, and many scientists that also have you look at it as experts. Our voices have been shut down because we don't have the influence probably with the government and order to come and speak. But at the end of the day, if you look at the pandemic and what is happening in our world, you just find out that some of what we're responding to, they are not scientifically proven. That you lock down and it solves a pandemic. All those.
Mr.
Look at it. Yeah.
Mr. Ikwunsi, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Our e-Congress is going to end in about a minute.
Okay, let me summarize.
Well, the thing is, could you come and maybe we could ask your question tomorrow? Can you join us tomorrow?
Okay, I'll do so. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for my Congress. Thank you. All right.
So actually, thank you again, Professor Mr. Adomas, and I will pass this on to see if Professor Ephraim would like to say a few words in closing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, my dear friends. Really, we have passed those absolutely fascinating presentations, and I believe that tomorrow we will continue. We need to just expose us as really working scientific institute, and we started to do this, and we will continue. Thank you very much again for your very nice presentation, and see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Great job. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Great job. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye.
Можно остановить трансляцию и пару слов?
Thank you, translators, too. Thank you so much.
Спасибо.
And thank you very much for very nice moderation, Alina. Thank you.
I guess you expect me to be there tomorrow morning at 6 in the morning?
If you can.
You can count on me. A little sleepy, but you can count on me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody, too. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Спасибо нашим переводчикам. Очень